Welcome to Beyond Six Figures, the podcast that helps business coaches to micro-niche, get noticed, and become fully booked. Learn from top industry leaders who've successfully taken their businesses and their lives beyond six figures. Get ready to level up your coaching business and make this world a better place, one business at a time. And now, here's your host, Ziv Raviv.
Hello, welcome to Beyond Six Figures. Today we are joined by Cameron Herold, often referred to as the CEO Whisperer, as the former COO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Cameron was instrumental in scaling the company from $2 million to $106 million in revenue over 6 years. That's just such a crazy growth, 50 times growth that is phenomenal. Expanding the team to over 3,100 employees. He's also the founder of the COO Alliance, established in 2016, which is the world's leading network for COO, Chief Operating Officers. Cameron also hosts the Second in Command podcast, where he interviews top-level COOs to share insights and strategies. As a best-selling author, Cameron has written 6 influential business books, including Double Double, Vivid Vision, Meetings Suck, Free PR, and more. His expertise has transformed the way CEOs and COOs approach leadership, scaling, and company culture. It's an honor to have you here today with us. Thank you so much, Cameron. Hello.
Ziv, thank you so much. Hello. Shalom.
Thank you. We like to start the conversation with business coaches and with people that are talking about business and advising people on business, with just understanding a little bit of their journey. And your journey has been a journey of actually doing business. You didn't get to where you are today, where you train and coach COOs by accident. You actually got to that role in your journey. So can you give us your introduction of what actually made you ready to become the COO of 1-800-JUNK?
Sure, for sure. I actually grew up in a very entrepreneurial family where my father was an entrepreneur. Both sets of grandparents ran companies, and I was groomed to be an entrepreneur, as were my sister and my brother. We've all run our own companies for around 20 to 25 years. I was running my first company at 20 years old. I had 12 full-time employees working for me in a business that I started. So when I was in university, I was already running my own business. And then I got involved in a franchise organization where I learned how to put business systems in place that were easy to implement and were very scalable. And that taught me how to franchise and how to actually work inside of a franchise organization. It also taught me how to coach entrepreneurs. I started coaching, and I know this is what your podcast focuses on. I started coaching entrepreneurs 35 years ago. I had coached 120 entrepreneurs before 1993. So I'd been in the world of business coaching before there was even a term for business coaching. The kind of business coaching world started in the early 90s. So I really got involved in that space and in helping to scale these businesses. And I think that gave me my kind of COO chops. It allowed me to understand how to scale businesses, how to put systems and processes in place to allow businesses to scale. And because I'd touched so many different entrepreneurs, I understood the mindset of the visionary. I understood the mindset of that CEO and how to help them make their dreams come true. So I helped build a company in the house painting space. We ended up with 800 franchisees every year. Then I was the co-founder of a chain of auto body collision repair shops. We built that up to what is now the largest collision repair company in the world. And then I was the president of a private currency company reporting to the CEO. So I'd been in these kind of second in command roles a couple of different times, when I then joined my best friend, Brian, at scaling up what was called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And we took that company, as you mentioned, from 14 employees to 3,000 employees system-wide over 6.5 years. So I'd been doing it a number of times. And then when I was able to practice and do it with Brian, for the first 5 years, it was pretty easy for me. It was only in the 6.5 year mark where it got to be very tough. The business was really a little bigger than probably where my core competency lay, which is probably in the kind of $1 million to $50 million range, I'd say would my zone of genius be. And then I left that company 18 years ago. And then in the last 18 years, I've been coaching entrepreneurs all over the world. I've been running the COO Alliance, as you mentioned, and I have an online course where that helps the leadership teams of companies scale, and that's called Invest in Your Leaders.
In your book, Double Double, you actually detail the key tools and insights and mindsets that were fundamental in you doubling 1-800-GOT JUNK from 2 million to 106 million together with your team and partner, of course. But that book, would you say that these days, based on your experience of seeing the changes in this world, the introduction of AI, if you could have that book change in some way or add another chapter to it, what would you what you would change in the book to make it even more up to date?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been very lucky that my expertise was on the people side of the business, right? On the recruiting, interviewing, leadership development of people, aligning of people, the scaling of an organization, and all of that really has not changed. Those best practices from 20 years ago are still the best practices today. I'm lucky that I was not a marketing expert 20 years ago because nothing I would have been good at is relevant. I'm lucky that I wasn't an IT expert 20 years ago. So I think the only chapter that needs to be fully replaced, I should probably rip it out of Double Double and throw it away, is the chapter on technology. And it was the technology tools. I laughed that I think I even mentioned that you should use video because back at 20 years ago, using Skype was revolutionary. So I think you could throw away the chapter on IT, but the other 16 chapters are as relevant today as they've ever been.
And basically, you're an expert in franchising, among other things. So using franchising, that was never a tool that you were afraid to use. You have experience in it. And that didn't really change these days. Maybe even it became easier to connect with people and educate them about the opportunity in a way.
Well, in its most basic sense, franchising is putting very simple systems in place to allow businesses to scale very quickly. So that is really applicable for every business, right? If I can tell Fred, who's buying a house painting company, how to hire people, how to train people, how to align people, how to manage projects, how to do sales and marketing and time management and operations and leading people and interviewing, if I can teach him all of those things, those are applicable for anybody that any business coach is coaching today. So even if you're not in the world of franchising your business, you have to be able to put the systems and the people and the vision in place to scale. Business format franchising is just the ability to stamp that out, hundreds of times.
I bet, though, that you have these type of conversations a lot where a COO will talk to you and will say, I think we need to franchise. I think we need to use this too. What are some of your guidelines to knowing when it's not the right time?
Great question. And I almost always tell the entrepreneur that they don't want to franchise. What they really want to do is expand. What they're really looking is a way to expand without using their money. What they're really looking to do is to expand to have multiple locations or hundreds of locations. But no one wakes up in the morning saying, I want to be a franchisor, right? What they're saying is, I want a lot of locations, and I see that as one potential path to get there. The only way that you should ever franchise your business is if you have one location that is up and running, that is very profitable, that you could hire a manager to run and there'd still be enough profit left over for you to be very happy, because then that's something you can franchise, because you have to take royalties and call center fees and advertising fees and still leave that franchisee enough. So the business itself has to be a very profitable, usually a high gross margin business, to have enough profitability there for everybody who's involved. And I think often business people find out that they're building a business, they're running a business, and they're not making enough money off one location. So they want to have 50 locations, but that means the franchisee is not going to be making enough money, right? If you can't make enough money by yourself, you have no business franchising. So in all of the businesses that I built that we did franchise, the franchisees made a lot of money as well. And I think that was one of the keys for our success.
Do you have any range of profit margin that you would say that's when you are willing to, I want a practical tool for our business coaches that are listening right now, where they can talk back to the client, and I was in that situation myself. A client would say, that's my future. I'm going to build my business to a level where I franchise. And I didn't know what is the profit margin that they should use and target.
Yeah, I think you need to be able to have one location earning at least $300,000 or $400,000 in profit to allow you to franchise, because then you can hire someone to manage it, you can pay some franchise fees, and you can still have enough left over. So as long as you're making about $300,000, $400,000 in profit from a location, or
are we talking annual or monthly?
Annually.
Okay.
Annually. Or that you could have 4 or 5 locations that one person could manage 4 or 5 locations, like a sandwich shop where they could manage 5 locations in a territory, or a gym. Very easy to run businesses with not a lot of people. Those businesses, you can have multiple people being managed by one manager. Then those maybe have to make $80,000 or $120,000 in profit to allow one person to oversee 5. But I think the franchise or franchise unit has to be in that $300,000, $400,000 range in profit to allow the franchisor to have something that is worth franchising.
I love it. Very practical. Let's try and go down a little bit to smaller businesses. And I wonder, because you work with COOs mainly, what's your criteria for coaching someone in your organization? What do you think would be the red line where they're not ready for you?
Yeah, so for anyone who wants to join the COO Alliance, the company needs to do at least $2 million in revenue just to qualify to be a member. And then the only person who can join is the person that is second in command to the CEO. So it could be a vice president operations or a general manager or a managing director or a COO. The title doesn't matter as much as they are the second in command to the CEO. They're the integrator to the visionary. That's number one. If they want to come to one of our 2 in-person events that we run every year, they need to do at least $5 million or greater in revenue just to be able to attend those. And then for me to coach companies, when I'm coaching companies, I need 5 million or revenue for me to even talk to them as a coach, because I really want companies to have management teams and people and systems and proof of concept in place for me to truly help them scale. So that tends to be my kind of zone of genius, is that 5 million plus range.
I love it. And I wonder if you don't mind talking about what, like, by now you have your reputation, you have your podcast and your books, and people know of you. And of course, once they look into the details, the credibility just everywhere. But do you still these days do, on your day-to-day, do something to grow the COO Alliance?
Well, are you talking about what I'm doing, or what
Yes.
we're doing to grow the COO Alliance, or am I seeing something within the COO Alliance that companies are doing to grow?
Oh, no. Let's start with your business. Like, what do you do to market your business?
Well, one is leveraging podcasts. One of my books is called Free PR. So for me, it's easy to get my message out to the masses by talking to podcasts, by being written up on bloggers. I've been in the physical print magazine, the actual magazines of Forbes, Fortune, Entrepreneur, Inc., Success, American Airlines. The actual physical magazines have covered me and my work. I've been in the New York Times, Dallas Morning News, Chicago Tribune. So me getting press coverage about my business, what we're doing for second in commands, how we're helping entrepreneurs make their visions come true, that allows me to then share that on social media, share it with my potential clients, have my sales team share that with our customers. And that social proof, that third-party social proof, allows me to scale more than marketing does. So that's the first thing that we're doing. Second thing that we're doing is making sure that our members are very, very happy, right? If we have a very high customer net promoter score, which we measure every single month, at the end of every one of our monthly mastermind calls, we measure our net promoter score. At the end of our 2 in-person events, we measure our net promoter score. And making sure that we have a positive 75 or greater on the NPS is something that then I know there's word of mouth. I know there's good renewals. I know our customers are happy. And then number 3 is just making sure that we're actually actively activating referrals. So making sure that we have business coaches sending us their clients, making sure that I have recruiting firms and executive recruiting firms sending me their clients, fractional CFOs sending me their COOs as clients. So I kind of stay away from the CEO space, right? There's all these mastermind communities for the entrepreneur. I'm friends with the owners of all of those so that they can send me their clients, and then I can take care of their COO. Those would probably be the 3 core things that we're doing.
I actually think that's more than 3, because some of these are just brilliant, like being in touch with CEOs, organizations, and masterminds. And that's like such a natural referral where it's just a really natural advice to do. And of course, podcasting and all of the rest. So
well, it's funny. My wife and I have been living as global nomads for the last 4 years. We've been in 59 countries in the last 4 years. And as an example, the last time I was in Israel, I met with an entrepreneur. He owns a company called Multiply Me. And about 3 weeks after meeting with him, he signed up his COO as a member of the COO Alliance. I went on a hiking trip to Uganda. I was with 24 other entrepreneurs in Uganda. And 2 weeks after I came back, 2 of the other CEOs signed up their COOs to be members of the COO Alliance. So my wife and I go explore the world, meet all these cool people, and then without even trying, they see this as a way to help them make their visions come true. So I think that's probably why I stay away from the CEO world as well.
I love it. So let's talk a little bit about your book, The Second in Command. And that was also the name you chose for your podcast. So tell us who should pick up this book and read it. And would it help a business coach to give better advice in business if he reads this book?
It will for sure. I named the book The Second in Command, my podcast The Second in Command. If I was going to rebrand my COO Alliance, I would probably call it something like the Second in Command Society. Because again, you don't have to have the COO title. You have to be the second in command to the CEO. The book, The Second in Command, is written to talk about how do you recruit, hire, onboard, and build a strong relationship with your second in command. So any business coach, if you're advising a CEO, you really want to understand how they can actually work better with their second in command. It also talks a lot about the recruiting and the onboarding and the building of leadership talent. It talks about the power of mastermind communities. There's an entire chapter devoted to the power of mastermind communities and coaching. So it actually supports coaches, in what they're doing for companies. But yeah, understanding that 2-in-a-box model and having that very strong relationship between the CEO and the COO. The CEO has to know where they're going. They have to be in charge of vision and culture, but the second in command has to make it come true. And I think often business coaches should also be coaching the COO as well as coaching the CEO, right? Get your COO into the COO Alliance, but the business coach should coach the CEO and the COO at least once or twice a month, maybe coach the CEO separately, but you really want to be coaching the person who's getting it done versus teaching the person who then has to teach someone else how to get it done.
It sounds like you're a very practical coach in your approach. You go into the nitty-gritty details, just like a COO would take the vision and bring it down. Also in your coaching and in your training, in the COO Alliance, you bring things down to in the trenches decisions.
Yeah, I also was trained that way, that at a very young age, I was trained to find the cheat sheets, to find the simple systems. And my dad taught me to what he called rip off and duplicate, right? To find the best systems that the best companies are already using and put those in place to allow me to scale. So I think that's what we try to do with the COO Alliance and with all of my books and even my Invest in Your Leaders training is give businesses the tools to allow them to scale. And then coaches can help them put those systems in place. Coaches can help them to understand which systems to put in place first, because some of them are very foundational that you build off of some systems, right? I think often the entrepreneur gets excited about one new idea, but it might be the idea to put in place next year, but there's a more foundational, often a boring system that you have to put in place first.
What is the maximum amount of people that attend a mastermind of yours? Is there a cap, or is it something that is open for as many people as they want?
Yeah, we can have hundreds attend our monthly mastermind calls via Zoom, and we can have hundreds attend our AI innovation calls. We only allow 60 to come to the 2 in-person events a year. And that's just because we want a smaller, intimate environment. We also want a higher level of COOs. You need to do at least 5 million or greater. Some of our members do 400 or 500 million, but you need to be in that 5 to 500 million zone to come to the in-person. So the only cap that we have is for the 2 in-person events a year. And we have members right now from 17 countries. We have members from Dubai, from South Africa, from Australia. We got members from all over the world.
So with the AI innovation sessions, what is that all about, and what motivated you to start doing this?
Yeah, that was me just recognizing, and I think we all recognize that AI is going to rapidly change every company out there. And we at least need to understand that the tools exist. Maybe we don't have to know how to put them in place, but we have to get exposed to the possibility, exposed to the different ideas that are out there. So in January of this year, I started bringing in one AI expert every single month to do a 1 hour call where our members can get exposed to some of the bleeding edge technology solutions. And some are very random. Some might have no applicability to your company whatsoever. But the idea that AI can do that, I call it ideas having sex. You'll take an idea from here, an idea from there, and it'll turn into something else. Or it just shows you the idea of possibility and it brings you back into your business to say, let's find a way to scale without adding people, right? How do we get more done with less people faster? How do we get more done with the best people and slowly get rid of our bottom performers that we really don't need that aren't doing anything? So it's just exposing our members of the COO Alliance to some really good tools to allow them to scale.
What is it that you focus on that is different on your one-to-one coaching?
Well, some of it is mindset. I work with the CEOs or COOs around mindset, around communication, around unblocking. Sometimes it's just holding a mirror up and making them look in the mirror and make them realize that they're the problem. So often entrepreneurs point the finger at other people. And I teach you that if you're pointing the finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. If you're blaming someone, it's like you got 3 fingers pointing back at you. If you make that little, if someone's listening, they can't see me, but that's something I make sure entrepreneurs understand, that if you're blaming the CEO, well, you hired them, you onboarded them, you're doing one-on-one meetings with that COO, or how can you help the COO be a better leader? So it's often stuff around mindset, situational leadership, delegation. It's all the soft skills of the people side of the business is what I tend to coach on. It's why I've actually coached so many companies that I have no idea how their company runs, but I can coach at the highest level of that C-level team, is because I understand the people side of the business so well.
Is there a recent success story of one of your coaches that you are proud of, where they implemented something that you suggested?
So many. I mean, I have one who just sold the company for $67 million 2 months ago. It's called Hennessy Digital. I coached them for 4 years. Their COO, Scott Schrum, has been a member of the COO Alliance for 4 years. He's come to about 6 of our in-person events. I helped them go through a period where they were almost bankrupt, brought them through that period, and then they were able to sell the company for $67 million, and they had no debt. So all that came off the table for the team. I helped another company, Blue Grace Logistics, raise $255 million from Warburg Pincus. I coached them from 40 people up to 700 people. I coached another company that went on to become the number 2 company in the United States to work for on Glassdoor. But lots of examples I could point to all over the world of companies that I've worked behind the scenes with their CEO or COO on.
I want to raise an hypothesis with you and see where you stand on it. So we are dealing nowadays in business with a major transition in the way that the different generations are accepting work. So I'm going to directly point into the problem. We have the Gen Zs that are, some of them are now a part of the working force. They're the juniors, 20 to 27. They work in all of these businesses that your clients are the COOs of. And they like their digital sabbatical, and they like they sometimes need their safe spaces, and they sometimes don't show up to work as expected. And then you have the millennials, who are actually nowadays are mature and responsible and old enough to be middle management and sometimes beyond. They could even be COOs just by being experienced enough in that age bracket. Maybe sometimes they're not a COO yet, but they are very often will need to do the middle management, but they don't have the support that they need from the juniors. So they try to maintain their composure and their values, and they have a lot of values that are very positive, but they just don't get the support that they need. And then a business needs to run and operate.
Well, and then you have Gen X, and then you have the baby boomers. All 4 are still so often working inside of a company. So right now it's about each generation understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the other generations that they're working with. So Gen Z, as you put it, are very, very focused on 6 weeks to 6 months at a time, or often one project to one project at a time. They're not going to work for you for 2 to 5 years. They're certainly not going to work for you for 10 years. They're probably going to hop from company to company. So what you have to do is build your business around project by project, initiative by initiative, and try to actually find out how your company can help be a part of their dreams. But don't bet everything on them because their loyalty is not going to be as long as you expect. From the Gen Y group or the millennials group, it's for them to recognize that they need to work on their confidence, on their connections, and on their skills. And that's plugging them into coaching like the Invest in Your Leaders, getting them a business coach, putting them into the COO Alliance. But it's the leadership team working to grow their skills and growing their technology skills. There's 2 cohorts in the millennial group. There's the older cohort. The oldest one is around 46 years old, down to about 40. They tend to not have the technology skills that are as strong of the younger part of the millennial cohort. So if you look at the 28 to 40-year-old, they tend to have a much stronger technology skill set that they can bring to the table, and they have the leadership wisdom. That's the group that I tend to be betting on today to go into the leadership and management roles. And then Gen X and baby boomers are basically in trouble because they definitely don't have the tech stack experience. They're relying on, well, this is the way I've always done it. Well, business has changed so much in the last 6 weeks, let alone in the last 6 years. So it's that cohort that has to adapt or die very quickly. But it's recognizing that every generation is different. I would like to have Gen Z teaching tech skills to Gen X, and I would like to have Gen X teaching leadership skills to Gen Z, right? If both sides can work to mentor each other on their weaknesses and buffer their strengths, I think you have a really, really good kind of cohort being built out.
So you mentioned before marketing specifically with all the changes that are happening these days and how knowledge from 20 years ago might have not been relevant right now. Some of the platforms that are being used didn't even exist. But I wonder if you have some insights, because I just bet that some of your clients, the COOs, are in charge to some degree on overall company growth, and because in order to implement their vision, the vision of the CEO, growth is often a part of that vision. What can you tell us about improving marketing and focusing on growth?
I think for every company, what's most important on marketing is understanding the cost of acquiring a client and understanding the lifetime value that client brings you in terms of gross margin, and understanding the cash conversion cycle. That if you have to pay to get a client, how long does it take you to get to break even? And how much more gross margin can you extract over what time period? And it's understanding that velocity and that kind of cash conversion cycle that's critical. But if you don't understand the cost of acquiring a client and the lifetime value of a client in terms of gross margin, you're absolutely in trouble as a company. The rest of the marketing mix, whether it's social or outdoor or PR or sales or whatever it's going to be, digital, that doesn't matter as much as that cash conversion cycle. And I think if you don't measure the correct numbers and you're not focusing on the correct numbers, you're going to end up digging yourself into a hole. I was speaking with the head of a digital marketing agency the other day, and I said that if they would pay for the advertising and not charge a monthly fee at all to the client, and they only got paid a percentage of the gross revenue, they could get every client they want. They go, no, I can't pay for the advertising. The client has to pay for that. And I said, that's because you suck at advertising, you suck at marketing, because if you can't deliver enough gross margin for your client, there's no way that client should be hiring you in the first place. So if you can actually approach a marketing agency with that kind of a proposal, the only ones that you would be working with are the ones that will sign up for and deliver the gross margin that you need against the ad spend. Because the rest of it is just bullshit. They're going to be marketing to you about SEO and paid search and social media and traffic and email lists and all this stuff without generating the return that you absolutely need. And then they'll be confusing with stuff around contribution versus attribution. And none of that stuff matters at the end of the day to the company that needs to generate enough gross margin to pay for the marketing. And I also get very frustrated where a company will say, well, if you spend $1,000 to get a client, we'll generate $5,000 in revenue. That doesn't matter if my gross margin is 20%. If my gross margin is 20%, I'm only generating $1,000 from $1,000 that I spent. And if it takes me 2 years to get it, I'm bankrupt by the time I get there. So it's really understanding the basic numbers of your business that's critical. And that's why most businesses go out of business is they have a good product, they have a good brand, they have great marketing, they have a nice website, but the business, the numbers side of the business just doesn't work.
Let's circle back to your podcast. You interview COOs. How hard is it for you these days to actually get the interviewees to?
Oh, it's easy. I've done almost 500 interviews now over the last 7 years. So now I have companies coming to me every week that want to be interviewed. I have PR firms that are sending me their companies. I've got CEOs that have been on things like How I Built This or the Diary of a CEO. They want their CEO to be interviewed by me. So I think our brand is strong enough now with the Second in Command podcast that we're getting some really good companies. What I'm looking for is more global. I want more COOs of really good companies all over the world. So I've interviewed some from Saudi Arabia, some from Dubai, some from Europe. I want to get more from the MENA region. I want to get more from the European region. I want to get more from Latin America because I want to get a true global perspective of what's happening with business because the world is flat right now. But it's been very easy for me to get companies based in North America for sure.
And back in the beginning, when you just started the podcast,
it was hard.
What did you do though?
Yeah, I would have to phone friends. I would call CEOs that I would know. I would pull in favors. I would just cold call other entrepreneurs that I'd met. And I'd say, hey, can I interview your second in command? Here's what I want. I was very clear on what my show was about. I wanted to talk about how to make the CEO's dream come true. I wanted to talk about how to build a relationship with that entrepreneur. And I wanted to talk about the skills that someone needs to be able to get into that role of a COO. That's what the show was about. But it was really just calling friends. And then after we got about 10 or 12 episodes, I had enough social proof to be able to show those episodes. But yeah, in the early days, it was begging for favors for sure.
Over the years, you've interviewed hundreds of them. So how many of them, if you can estimate or if you know, actually chose later on to join the COO Alliance?
I don't know the exact number, but it's enough. It's enough that the gross margin from the members that I've interviewed on the podcast that have then joined have paid for the cost of the podcast over the 7 years. So I think the total cost of me running the podcast over 7 years is about $175,000. I've definitely generated more than $175,000 in gross margin from people that have found out. So as an example, there's a company out of the United States called ButcherBox. They sell meat like steaks and pork and chicken all over North America. They do about $600 million in revenue. Their COO learned about the COO Alliance because I interviewed her on the podcast and I coach her. So, over the course of the last year, she's paid me about $100,000 for coaching and for COO Alliance and coming to an event. That pays for 4 years of the podcast right there. So lots of cases of that for sure. And that was definitely the reason for starting the Second in Command podcast was to give me brand recognition for the COO Alliance, to give me exposure for the COO Alliance, and to market the Invest in Your Leaders course. I also now have a co-host. I've now got a former COO Alliance member, Savannah Brewer, who's also interviewing COOs. So now we have 2 guest hosts, me interviewing some and Savannah interviewing some, and we get a different flavor from both of us doing interviews.
I bet that if you actually run the numbers, you will see that you have a return on investment of your time and energy and money into the podcast that is way, way more than you covered your expense.
Yeah, what we're recognizing right now is everyone who joins the COO Alliance has been listening to the podcast or has read the book, The Second in Command, or their CEO heard me speak at an event. It's almost like the rest of the marketing that we have doesn't matter, that it's just exposure, but it's just that they've heard the podcast or they've read the book or their CEO knows me.
I want to circle back to your book, Free PR. Do you think that this book applies to business coaches?
For sure. The idea of a business coach is that they're out there with a few different stories that the press could talk about. So as an example, every business coach has 3 or 4 stories that the media could talk about. The first is what I call the Genesis story. It's how their business of coaching started. they quit their crappy job, or they got fired from the job they were in, or they decided to move into semi-retirement, or they saw all these entrepreneurs like flies trying to get out a window, banging their head on the window and ending up dead on the windowsill, and they wanted to help them. Whatever their story is about starting as a business coach is a story the media would talk about. Number two is the hero's journey, right? It's how they struggled and they almost went bankrupt and they almost decided to close down their role of a business coach, and how they overcame that adversity and they came out the other corner. That's a second story. A third one is how their coaching has helped a customer. So if you can talk about a customer that they worked with that was going through bankruptcy or struggling with scale or didn't have a really good team, and how they were able to coach them through success, that's a really good story that they could actually have the media talk about. And the fourth is around AI, right? How are they leveraging AI, or how are they helping their companies leverage AI to scale or to scale up their company? Those are four stories that anyone in the business coaching world could have: a podcaster, a magazine, newspaper, a local blogger. There's lots of media that would talk about those stories for sure.
Cameron Herold, where can people go to learn more about everything that you do?
Sure. If they go to CameronHerold.com, and it's Herold, CameronHerold.com, it has information on the COO Alliance, my Invest in Your Leaders training, Second in Command podcast, my YouTube channels. It's all laid out on the website, CameronHerold.com, almost like a link tree. Very easy to follow.
And we'll put all the show notes, all the links to your different websites, and just like is outlined on your website and to your website. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you and to have you here with us. You're a fountain of knowledge. Your books help so many entrepreneurs and people out there. And I'm just hopeful that people that are into business coaches will take the time to study these tools and these ideas, because eventually in business, when you're giving advice to people about their business, you need to understand certain fundamental truths that are covered in many of your books.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Beyond Six Figures.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Six Figures. Check out the extended show notes that include bonus material, practical tips, and exclusive resources on our website, zivraviv.com. Until next time, keep dreaming big and pushing your business and your life beyond six figures.